Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I have used this old t-shirt to create a wrap top. I have seen tops like this around for a while now and have always wanted one, so I decided to make my own. This project is so easy and therefore perfect for beginners, so let's get into it. First, I tried the top on and decided where I wanted the new top to sit. I wanted mine to sit just above my belly button and marked this with some chalk. Next, I laid the top out and made sure everything was laying flat. I then drew a straight line across my t-shirt using the chalk mark as a guide. Once I was happy with the line, I cut across it. Save the piece of fabric you cut off, you'll need this later. Next, I needed to cut the t-shirt open so I could make it a wrap top. Here I am showing you where I needed to cut the t-shirt. Placing my measuring tape from the bottom corner of the t-shirt, I lined this up with the neckline on the opposite side and marked all the way along this point. I then placed the measuring tape on the opposite top corner and marked this on the t-shirt until it lined up with the previous lines I had drawn, so I had something like this. Once I'd marked this out, I cut along the lines I had drawn, making sure I only cut through the top layer of the t-shirt. You should now have something that looks like this. I didn't need to hem these edges of my top as the fabric doesn't fray, but you could always hem yours if you wanted to. Then I needed to extend this side of the t-shirt so I would have enough fabric to make the wrap top work. Taking the piece I cut off the bottom of the t-shirt, I cut along both sides so I had two separate pieces of fabric. Put one of these pieces aside, you will need it later to make the ties for the top. Going back to my top, I now needed to attach this piece of fabric to the short side to help make the wrap part. I placed this piece of fabric onto my top, right sides together, so the bottom edge of the top lined up with the bottom edge of the fabric piece, and pinned these together. Once pinned, I folded this over to see how it would look once it was sewn and cut off some of the excess fabric so it wouldn't get in the way while I was sewing. Once I'd done that, I sewed where I'd pinned, using a zigzag stitch and a 1/2 inch seam allowance. This is how it looked once it was sewn. Next, I cut off the excess fabric so the top would look neater. This excess fabric was on the side here and along the bottom edge. This is what I had so far. I now needed to make the ties for the top using the piece of fabric I put aside earlier. I first drew a straight line down both sides to give the fabric straight edges. Next, from the top edge, I measured down 1.5 inches and marked this. I did this all the way along the fabric and repeated this down the fabric, so I had 3 pieces like this. As a reference, my pieces are 18.5 inches long. There isn't a specific measurement for these pieces, just make sure you have enough fabric to use as ties. Next, taking one of these pieces, I folded it in half and cut along the centre point so I had 2 equal pieces. Each of these pieces will be added to one of the other 2 pieces to make 2 longer ties. Once I'd cut this, I took one long piece and one short piece, placed these right sides together and pinned along the short edge. I then repeated this for the other 2 pieces. Once pinned, I sewed these in place, using a zigzag stitch and a 1/4 inch seam allowance. This is how they looked once they were sewn. I took one of these pieces and folded it in half, right sides together, and pinned along the long open edge. Then repeated this for the second piece, so I had something like this. I then sewed where I'd pinned using a straight stitch and a 1/4 inch seam allowance. This is how they looked. I now needed to turn these pieces inside out so they would be the right way around. To do this, I attached a safety pin to one end and fed it through the tube I had just made. Once the safety pin made it to the other end of the tube, I pulled on the fabric to turn the tube the right way out. I then repeated this for the second piece. I could now attach these pieces to my top to make the ties. Opening the top, I placed one of these ties on each side of my top, right sides together, like this, and pinned these in place. Once pinned, I sewed them in place using a straight stitch and a 1/4 inch seam allowance. This is how they looked. The last thing I needed to do was make a small hole in one of the side seams so one of the ties could pass through it to wrap around my body. I used a seam ripper to do this, but scissors will be fine. I made a hole that was about 1/2 inch long and made sure to sew over the ends of the hole to hold the other stitches in place and to stop the rest of the side seam coming undone. Once I'd done that, the top was complete, and this is how it looked. Here I am showing you how the wrap part of the top works. I decided to pair mine with a pair of jeans for the perfect everyday look. However, this top could also be paired with something smart for a more dressed up look. This top was so quick and easy to make, and I hope you will give it a go. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like, comment and subscribe. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.